Oftentimes we hear the saying that change is inevitable or change will eventually come, but then we endure seasons of our lives where nothing seems to change and nothing moves, and we wonder, if change is inevitable, why isn't that happening for me? And I have come to learn that God will put us into temporary seasons of our lives, and a lot of the seasons are temporary. There's very few times where He'll put us in a very long-term season of our lives. Nothing lasts forever though, but sometimes He'll put us in long-term seasons of our lives. And I was reading Ecclesiastes about chapter 3 about how there's a time for everything. And it says here, there's a time to mourn and there's a time to dance. There's a time to embrace and there's a time to refrain from embracing. There's a time to keep silent and there's a time to speak. There's a time to throw and there's a time to keep. And I was thinking about all of that and the various changes that we go through in life. And sometimes it feels very disappointing when certain change isn't happening right when we want it to happen, or changes are happening, but it doesn't look like it's happening for our good. And I realized that along the way to change, people will disappoint you, things will disappoint you. Sometimes you'll feel upset or disappointed with God. But the whole point of changing and realizing that there's a time for everything is to grace yourself and allow God to grace you through the processes of life. Life will twist and turn you and flap you upside down and do all of these things in order for you to understand that change is going to happen. But sometimes you're in a season of stagnancy because you have to learn a lesson. And for me, I feel like the season that I'm in, it was only an 8-month season, but it was temporary. But the lesson that I was learning was that you have to start humble beginnings. And the more that I grow older, the more that I actually crave to start humbly. I feel happy for people, who got a car, a luxury car once they turned 16, or who never had to work. But those situations in my life built me to who I am today, and I don't regret them at all. Like, I couldn't imagine a life where I haven't had to work for my own money, or I haven't had to work for my own car, or I haven't had to, pay my way through school. And a lot of people see things like that as suffering, right? And the Bible tells us to take all joy in suffering, right? Especially if we're doing God's will and what it is that He's called us to do. And some people are more fortunate than others to be able to not have to work for anything. But honestly, I would say that we're the most fortunate when we have to work for what we have. We're the most humble when we start at humble beginnings, because how do you know what a good thing is until you've really worked for it, or until you've really watched it grow and build? And I'm not saying that you have to suffer in order to get good things. I think that's a rhetoric that's taught that is very, very, very damaging, because it tells you that you're not worthy of a good thing unless you've been battered and bruised. And I don't believe that, but I do believe that there has to be a process of refining. There has to be a process of cleansing. And this is the same thing that happens with gold when it's purified. There's a process of refining that is necessary in order to get the purest form of gold. And I think that's also true with our lives. Like, for the first, year of my university, my parents paid for everything, right? And it was a great feeling. I was kind of just gracing my way through it. I had a bunch of extra money because guess what? I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have much responsibilities. I was basically just getting things for free. And then the second, I had to start paying for stuff myself. I had to start learning how to budget. I had to start learning money management. And in that moment, I can look at somebody else who doesn't have to go through that change, or who doesn't have to prepare for, a time of having abundance to a time of having nothing. Like, in that moment, I could have looked at them and been like, oh, well, how come they get this and I don't? Or it's so annoying that I have to work and they don't. But what it teaches me is that when you really work for the things that you have and you trust God for the things that you have, and you pair your faith with works, like, everything is worth it at the end. And it is so rewarding to say that I made it through the finish line. I stuck in obedience to God's will. And so when we resist change, we resist moments of humility. Humbling is so important. To be humble is very important. It's not about beating yourself down. It's not about suffering to the point of no return. Like, it's literally just about learning the lessons in order for you to hold the things that you get in your next season, your season of abundance, your season of permanent provision, to a high degree, to a high standard, to understand that if not for God, you wouldn't have had that. If not for God, things wouldn't have worked out in your favor. And a lot of the times it's difficult to see his hand in our lives. It's difficult to see how he's going to turn our situation around. I mean, right now, I need like 15 things in like 2 months, and I have no clue how he's going to do it. He said he would, but I have no clue how he's going to do it. But I know that because I did the hard thing, and I went through the time of, weeping, and I went through the time of throwing away stones, and I went through the time of silence, and I went through the time of war, and I went through the time of wilderness. I know that because I did those things and I went through those wilderness seasons and I remained faithful, that this next season, there's no way. God would be a liar if the next seasons weren't everything we could have ever imagined and more, right? And the Bible says God is not a man that he shall lie. And so if you've already went through all of the hard stuff, if you've already experienced all of the negative change and the negative side effects to change, know that because you wept, you will laugh. Because you mourned, you will dance. Because you threw away stones, you will gather stones. Because you threw away relationships, you will get new relationships that will actually last this time. Because you tore apart your system of belief, you will be rewarded with a renewed mind. And so when we keep in mind that God keeps his word, there's really nothing to worry about. Change will happen, and if change hasn't happened for you yet, you gotta keep firm. And sometimes you also have to just ask yourself, is there something that I'm doing that is making me resist this change? Like, am I resisting this specific lesson? Am I avoiding something that's been brought up in my life multiple times? So you do have to question yourself and make sure that you're in alignment with God. And it's something as simple as praying, God, put me in alignment with you. Let it be all of you and none of me. And that's just that. But we have to be willing to do the hard part, right? Obedience is better than sacrifice. And so understand that abundant season, that change, that positive change that you're looking for. Maybe you're looking to change cities. Maybe you're looking to change monetary things like cars or houses. Maybe you're looking to change the environment in your mind. God can do all of those things, but we have to start at a humble place in order for that change, that successful and abundant change, to be accessible to us.